Welcome to Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by ConverseCountyTourism.com. Feel the energy of Converse County. Explore Douglas's Railroad Heritage, Ayers Natural Bridge, and the Jackalope legend. Glen Rock boasts scenic trails, dinosaur history, and small town charm. Plan your visit at ConverseCountyTourism.com. Well, great shot there from Daryl of the tornado that touched down near Lusk, Wyoming yesterday. As expected, it kind of got wild and woolly in many areas of the High Plains region over a large stretch of geography. A good chunk of Wyoming, Nebraska, as we mentioned, Kansas, eastern areas of Colorado. You'll see just lots of storm reports here in a moment. Great photo there of that tornado. Looks like it did briefly touch down several times before going back up. But overall, things are going to chill for a bit. The weather going to settle down. Much drier, much warmer air overspreads the areas that have been on the western slope. That's coming onto the eastern slope. So we're going to have things settle down a bit so you can get your lawn mowed, get some other things done, maybe pour some concrete, things you haven't been able to do in this weather here for folks east of the divide. So thunderstorms are going to take a few days off. Now we're going to see a little bit of thunderstorm activity in Montana, maybe far northwestern Wyoming, into the Pacific Northwest and western Canada. But a large part of the West will take a break. Understanding climatology is important, and I bring this up because we do see a pattern late spring and early summer that shows up in the data. When you start looking at 80, 100 years of precipitation data, there's an interesting trend that happens in the middle of June to the middle of July. I'm going to show you that here in a moment. Big warm up is coming this weekend. In fact, it's going to get downright hot in many areas after being downright cool in many areas yesterday. But as we've been advertising, that trough comes in next week and we just cool right back off again. And here come the thunderstorms with that cooler weather as we get into next week. Here's the storm report for yesterday. The red dots report where tornadoes were observed all the way from North Dakota there to Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma. The wind was strong, as we saw, with a lot of very strong outflow boundaries, as you see in the blue, then lots of hail reports, as you can see there in the green dots. And it all got started with scenes like this yesterday with blue sky and sunshine early for some of you, then the clouds built up. And then, boy, low-hanging clouds there for this time of year, just showing a lot of moisture in the air there along the Bighorns. Beautiful shot there, beautiful panoramic north of Morrill, Nebraska, of the thunderstorms that developed up north, up near that Pine Ridge area. Got very busy, as evidenced by that Lusk tornado that you just saw there. Another great shot from the day before of that supercell structure, those big thunderstorms in southern Montana and northern Wyoming earlier in the week. Things really greening up with the precipitation in the month of June. This is a shot right in the heart of where the drought conditions were really bad only about 6 to 8 weeks ago, and conditions have improved greatly since. Now you can see at the bottom here, dust getting blown up from a microburst. This is from near the Torrington area. And we have seen that over the last 5 to 7 days. Very strong wind gusts from some of these showers and thunderstorms, especially earlier in the week and the weekend when the lower levels were a little bit drier. And this is a common sight in the panhandle of Texas. Outflow boundaries coming from those thunderstorms whip up the wind, whip up the dust, and can be a real hazard traveling in some parts of the high plains and down into the panhandles, as you're seeing right there. Satellite photo this morning tells a lot of the story. You can see the cloudiness and the showers and thunderstorms associated with that upper trough that was back over Salt Lake yesterday morning. It's now heading this way. So you can see that we have a lot more in the way of clear skies here in the west, and the water vapor shows it very well. Look at this sharp boundary between the moisture and the much, much drier air, extremely dry air down here. But you can see the desert air, the air that's been on the western slope, is now going to come eastward. We have this residual moisture up here. That's why I mentioned there could still be some thunderstorms up here over the next couple of days. Now, talked about climatology. And I'm using Cheyenne here, but we're just going to use Cheyenne as a proxy for a lot of the Intermountain West and the adjacent Western High Plains, because there are precipitation patterns that happen through the course of the year that are easy to highlight. And what you see here, if you look carefully, you see there are two precipitation spikes that happen in this region in terms of where the precipitation likes to fall more frequently and heavily. The first spike, as you would expect, you can see the ramp up of spring, but you can see that May 1 through the middle of June, right here, there's a spike. Okay, that's what you expect. Climatology says it should get wetter this time of year. There's another spike that starts to go back up again, middle of July, that goes into the early parts of August right here. Okay, so there are two spikes. Notice where the dips are. There's a significant dip that happens the middle of June to the beginning of July. Not every year, but there is a dip. Why is that? Because we are in the wet pattern of spring here, and we transition to a different pattern before we await the monsoon season right here. So there tends to be a natural drier gap mid-June roughly to mid-July roughly. Doesn't mean it doesn't rain. It just doesn't rain as much or as frequently. So before you get on YouTube posting about how dry it's going to be getting, and it may not be getting dry, but there's a natural dip, okay? There's a natural dip in the climatology before the monsoon season starts up again. Then we start to see the downward trend in precipitation. This is when people complain to me all the time it's too dry. Well, it is dry. It's expected to be. You can see that in a lot of this region, most of our precipitation falls between these two brackets here. But this law is something I wanted to point out to you. It's not unusual to hit mid-June into early July and have a break. And we're going to have a break here coming on up over the next few days. The pattern shows that low heading into the upper Midwest, moving out. Westerly flow commences, and we get warmer, drier air coming on in. But by Saturday morning, there's that trough into the Pacific Northwest. And we'll talk about this here in a minute. The clockwise flow around the high in the east, the counterclockwise flow around this low is going to really pump in warm air out of Arizona, the Great Basin states. Then you downslope it, and that adds heat to the air from the compression of the downsloping winds east of the divide. So between now and Saturday, here's your precipitation forecast. You can see dry air nudging in from the deserts. Here's the shower and thunderstorm activity in the Pacific Northwest, Montana, southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, into British Columbia. Then there's going to be shower and thunderstorm activity with that low here heading into the Great Lakes and the east. This wedge of warmth and dryness really shows up in the temperature anomalies. So the temperature anomaly Thursday shows a big warm up. By Saturday morning, though, look at the colder weather heading into the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. But the compression, the downsloping, when I say compression, when air comes downhill, downslope off the east side of the Rockies, it sinks and the atmosphere has weight and there's compression. Compression will warm up the air. So it gets hot across the adjacent high plains, east of the divide, relative to average, a lot of heat right here. So we're going to really flip the script, so to speak, for a few days. However, by noon Sunday, the cold air gets into western and northern Wyoming, into Montana. Look at this ring of cool right here surrounding some very, very warm conditions in the central and the east, as we mentioned yesterday. And by Monday morning, the colder air spills along and east of the divide. You can see the cold front gets to the Palmer Divide by noon Monday as it spills over while the heat continues into the east. And as we get into next week, the trough kind of gets stretched out a little bit, stretched between one part of the low going into California, the other one into south central areas of Canada. But the general pattern is a trough in the west, high in the east. Now let's go back to the circulations working together here. We had talked about this maybe showing up at the end of June. So these two wind circulations are going to work together. What's going to happen? Air out of Mexico and Central America gets forced northward, then northeastward as we get into next week. So we are going to have some really hot weather here. We're going to have some really cool weather here. So these two kind of even each other out, so to speak, in terms of anomalies. And then when we look at that circulation working together, when we look at the precipitable water, what do we have here? Well, we have a ring of higher water content air that comes up out of Mexico, and it makes what we call the ring of fire. And this is showing up right here at the end of June. What this means is if this pattern sets up, the wind patterns with the high and the low work in unison and draw this moisture up. And what you have in the heat here, you have a lot of heat here, colder air aloft here. This just makes a ring of thunderstorms daily as long as that pattern holds. So what this could mean for you folks down in New Mexico, maybe parts of Arizona, northwest New Mexico, then under the darker green or blue here, we get this ring. And there it is. This is by Tuesday. And the maps look the same. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, probably Friday of next week. You can see where the thunderstorms are going to want to be. Basically in a ring, just like this. And then moisture comes up and kind of wicks its way up along the front range of the Bighorns up into southern Montana here. And notice underneath the high, you have subsidence and you don't have as much thunderstorm activity except down here where there's moisture up near the Gulf. So a really interesting pattern. Hot, then cool, then moisture gets drawn up from the south and west, getting those showers and storms going. And if you look at the 10-day temperature anomaly from Monday through Friday of next week, you see the blue, see this right there? There's your ring, and that's going to keep it cooler here while the heat's there. So the country really divided in two in terms of temperature as we get into next week. Yes, we're still seeing snow in the modeling for parts of Canada, the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies early next week, although these are very high elevation snowfalls, but nonetheless, the first few days of summer won't feel that way in the high elevations of the Northwest U.S. and Southwest Canada. And take a look up north. Look at all that snow in Greenland for the first several days of summer in far northern areas of Canada. Have yourself a very good Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.